This is the All-Star Networking Show with your host, Cathy Paper.
Well, good morning, everyone. Super excited for today's guest, Kane Harris. And I met through emails and connections and whatnot. And I'm so psyched to have him on as a guest today. So, Kane, why don't you say hello to the listeners and let them know what you're up to these days?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me. And so, yeah, like Cathy mentioned, I'm Kane Harris. I work with the G. Elberg Entertainment. I head up our speakers division, which was recently acquired in the last 2 years called Elan Speakers Agency. Previously, it was run by Debbie Hagen, and she kind of like mentored me a little bit, and I've kind of hit the ground running from there. And we're excited to offer our clients a lot more opportunities in the keynote speaker space because they are just a bit different from entertainment. And so we wanted to keep that legitimacy and keep the name as well. So that's been a fun journey for me the past 2 years. And on the side of that, I also do a little podcasting myself with the Golden Gophers here in Minnesota, talking about Gopher sports, mainly football, basketball, both men's and women's. But when you don't find me doing those two things, I'm spending tons of time with family and love to enjoy the Minnesota summers when it's not raining every single day.
It has been a lot of raining lately, Kane, hasn't it? That's for sure.
Absolutely.
But let's start with I'm going to start with the easy one of the Gopher sports and football and basketball, men's and women's. And because you said a little podcasting, and then you told me during the season you do 5 podcasts a week.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's more than I brush my teeth.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean, there's a lot to cover when the Gophers are in season, and so we try to keep the slogan true when we say we're your team every day. Now it's not every day because I'm not doing 7 days a week, but I feel like we cover a whole lot in 5 days a week, and the shows are relatively shorter, between 20 to 30 minutes or so. So it's not anything too extensive. And once you get into the season, I feel like, especially for football, it's kind of the same weekly layout because you have the same process of getting to know who you're playing that week and then getting to know who will be the key players for the Gophers this week and things like that. So it becomes a little easier actually in the season. I would say out of season, it's a lot harder because you got to drum up more talk pieces, you got to drum up more stories or things to think about. And once you do that for 2 or 3 months, it's like, okay, what else can I talk about?
Well, okay, so let's just tell people, because how did you get so passionate about Minnesota sports? I've been a Gopher basketball season ticket holder since my dad had tickets when I was a little kid, but what's your connection and passion to this?
Yeah, I would say I think college football was my kind of last in line when it came to finding my favorite teams. And I really kind of just stuck to home. But it was really cool as I got older because I knew a lot of the people actually playing on the teams. And so having that kind of personal connection, it made me want to pull for them more. And then the more I got involved and the more I got into the fan base and the more I got just interested in it all, I feel like that's the more passionate I became and the more diehard I became with it all. So I would say most of my favorite sports teams are Minnesota-based teams, except for in the NBA, where I'm actually a Boston Celtics fan. So I'm very happy with this
Uh,
past year's results. And we've been through some long years when I was younger. So it's nice to finally see them get back to the mountaintop.
yes, good. That was a good series. I watched that. I watched more basketball this season than I ever have. So both the Timberwolves run, and then my son lives out in Boston. So
Awesome.
that was really fun. So how has the podcast and your love of sports translated into business? Have you seen that at all?
Yeah, I feel like it's an easy, I guess when you're going to a networking event or you're going to a conference or things like that, it's an easy talk piece. It's an easy conversation starter to break the ice a little bit. Because a lot of people love sports or a lot of people have connections to certain universities or things like that. So I feel like the more I've talked about Gopher sports, the more I've learned about other schools in the Big Ten or other opponents that they've played, especially on the college basketball side, where they don't necessarily always stay in the Big Ten in the non-conference schedule, where they play a lot more. So I feel like I've had talking pieces with speakers who went to Mizzou and the Gophers played Mizzou, so it was easy to kind of get the conversation rolling. I've had different clients who have been alum from different universities in the Big Ten, and so it's really easy to kind of use that as a springboard and erase the awkwardness or have that connecting piece right away that someone can remember you with, and then they kind of remember your name and that one little unique fact that you've given them to help hopefully remind you of them the next time you see them and then continue to build from there.
Yes, and okay, so listeners, that's what makes Kane an all-star networker. You just used a couple words that I want people to just keep in mind of being memorable and also being interesting and genuine. When you and I first met, somehow it was sort of the last thing you said, oh, and I run a podcast about Gopher sports. And I was like, oh, I lit up. I remember that. So great, 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 great. How have you built this network and this new acquisition? And I know Debbie, we go way back when I first started out as a speaker and working with some people. But how have you sort of built your professional network, Kane?
My journey has been a really weird cyclical process, but I feel like that's the best part about networking. Initially coming out of college, I actually worked in the advertising industry for 5 years or so. And then from there, as COVID kind of hit, I was working in sports data. And then I had actually taken a opportunity to go and study and get my master's paid for as a graduate assistant for the University of Minot State. And so I was out there working with their football team and doing video and what have you. But prior to that, I had actually worked with GL in some capacity as a musician, and I had kind of gone around the country in an a cappella group. So all these little eclectic things, but it all came back to fruition because when I moved back to Minneapolis after working for a football team for a few years on the video side of things, I had met with GL Entertainment and just told them, hey, if your acts are ever looking for any extra video opportunities or anything like that, I would love to be that avenue for them. And then that spurred into, oh, actually, we're acquiring a speakers agency, and we really loved our work with you prior to this. And also, you have a background in sales and marketing. So, would you be interested? And I was like, yeah, let's give it a run. And kind of got under Devi's wing and learned her process, knew a little bit about the entertainment process. And so, it's not like I sought out this sales position or anything like that, but it kind of all came from the networking and starting in music and then moving over to more of a radio and video recording. And then that took me to football and it brought me back to a sales role that I had started in marketing. So it just goes to show like everywhere you go, you're building connections and building opportunities and to never really burn a bridge.
Yes, yes, yes. I love that. Everywhere you go, you're building bridges. That is so true. And a cappella group. I'm not sure you told me that.
It might be my
When,
secret fun fact from you.
yes. Okay, so do you still sing in groups or are you active in?
Um, I mainly sing in the shower in the car now, but there are occasions where I will kind of sub for different groups that we represent if they need a person of my voice part in there. So occasionally I'll get back on the stage, but otherwise I kind of keep it with the family and I've retired from that life for the most part.
Okay, well, I won't put you on the spot this show, but when you come back again, the next time we're going to have a little clip. I've got people doing Irish accents, and usually I give a shout out when I find out there's a secret. Like, I mean, that's more than a party trick, that's a professional skill. So that's awesome. And how about this in today's day and age where we do so much of our connections kind of on and off the screen? What have you found successful? Because you and I did start with an email.
Mhm.
So how do you build your network using both in person and online?
I think without being like too creepy or anything, I feel like I try to look at someone's LinkedIn profile and just see maybe if I know anybody that's similar, like we have the same connection, or if there's anything that maybe their likes or hobbies, I see something on there, maybe it's something I can bring up. But otherwise, I feel like if it's just kind of emailing and things like that, I try to, if I know they're in Minnesota or things like that, I'll ask maybe do they golf or what do they like to do in the summertime, just to get an idea of who that person is and maybe where we could connect. And so if someone's like, oh, I love walking my dog in the summer, I'll ask a little bit more about their dog, and then maybe the next time I intro myself or I come up, I'll ask about how's your dog doing or things like that, just to really help build that connection and that personableness. I just feel like in the world of AI and things where you can have them draft your emails and things like that, AI can never really add those connecting factors in there. So I feel like the more you can build those little unique things, it goes a long way.
That's great. That's great. And you said though the part I think for people, no matter where you're at in the networking journey, I say is sort of starting out, you're a scaredy cat, and then you kind of move towards that all-star, which you're an all-star. When you said you don't want to be creepy, what is it that you do when you don't really want to start reaching out to people?
Do you mean when you don't want to,
Like,
how do I motivate myself?
do you set time on your calendar to be on LinkedIn or?
Yeah, I try to kind of set time on my calendar to be on LinkedIn, or like when I'm uh, going to an event and I meet people for the first time, I usually either try to either jot a note to myself or kind of somehow to remember people's names that I actually met there, and then be sure to send them a LinkedIn request and just say it was nice to meet you today. Hopefully we can stay in touch, and nothing too far past that. I'm not like, let's work together, or if you need speakers, come my way. Unless we've had those conversations at the event where I'm just like, hey, it was great to meet. If you ever do need help, let me know. But otherwise, I kind of keep it short and sweet. And it was great to meet. And hopefully we can continue to connect down the line. And if I see them at another event, then maybe build it a little bit more in person. But then it's easier to check in with those people once you've kind of talked to them one, two, three times in person, because you've probably talked about a few things that are more personable. And then you've also talked maybe a little bit of business. So there's easy transitions for you in that factor. But I would say overall, when I really don't want to, I just try to schedule at least an hour or so twice a week to really think about how I could maybe be more active on LinkedIn, or think about maybe who am I trying to connect with in the next month or in the next 5 months, and how can I get there? What events do they maybe attend, or things like that, where I can maybe start to gradually build up to a more natural opportunity as opposed to feeling so like uh, robotic when it comes to that process.
Course. Yeah, no, see, this is why you're an all-star. So that's where usually I say to the listeners, push pause, rewind. If you didn't get all that, you just outlined your process of you have a strategy, you follow up, you said twice a week. Like those are all just awesome. If I were watching game footage of you networking, I'd be like, you're going in the first round, Kane. Going in the first round. So really nice. Do you think, what would you sort of share with people that maybe haven't connected with people in a while, and want to reconnect? Do you have any thoughts on that? Because I think people get kind of stuck and then they think, oh, I haven't talked to them for 3 years. I better meet somebody new. Um,
Yeah, sometimes it can be difficult. Sometimes it feels a little awkward, but I feel like, the worst thing you can get is a no or a no response. And I feel like at GL Berg, we always say, and it's kind of just a fun thing for ourselves, especially because when you hear no so many times, it can be a little defeating, or it can feel like you're kind of, um, I don't know, in a rut. And so I feel like a lot of us remind each other just for fun when it's been like a tough slew of like opportunities falling through or things like that. We say no is our second favorite answer, because it's better than no answer. But at the same time, like it doesn't hurt to reach out and reconnect and say like, hey, I know it's been a while. How have you been? We had connected at this event, or maybe bring back to mind where you had initially connected. So that way, hopefully, it can set off the light bulb for that person. But otherwise, maybe a way to reconnect with someone that you haven't seen in a few years is, say if you were at uh, SHRM event. Let's say Minnesota SHRM, and that's where you met this person at, and you know that SHRM event is coming up this October. Maybe when we get to mid-August, late August, you follow up and say, "Hey, I know it's been a while. We haven't talked in maybe a couple years, but we connected at SHRM a few years ago, and I was curious, are you coming to SHRM this year? I would love to touch base again, grab coffee." and maybe catch up or see how things have been going over the last couple of years. It's a reintroductory. It's not too crazy or out of the blue, and it has that connecting factor of this is where we met before, and I was wondering if maybe you were going again. Maybe they aren't going again, but at least it opens that door for them to be like, actually, I can't attend this year, but yes, we should catch up sometime. So there's different ways to kind of open the door in that way without feeling like it's out of left field.
Yes, no, really nice, really nice. Myself, I wrestle with that of like, oh, it's been so long, or I haven't talked to you. So that's great. What else? Anything else you'd share with people? Because again, you just seem masterful at this.
I would just say just be yourself. I mean, you understand you and your personality more better than anybody else does. So if you are a more like reserved or you hate getting on the phone or things like that, like you can still play to your strengths, and maybe you are more active on LinkedIn, or if you like to be more personable, maybe you set up more coffee chats if you can, or you find opportunities to grab lunch, or you go to more in-person networking events to connect with those people, and maybe find out when you're at those networking events, like, are there any other events you're attending this next couple month or so? I've been trying to look for something new, and maybe that's a way where you can get into front of a newer group of people. But really, I'd say, yes, develop your weaknesses, like get more comfortable with the phone and ease yourself into the process, but also always play to your strengths because it'll help bring you back up when it comes to your confidence and feeling like you're taking a step in the right direction. And then in the weakness areas, maybe just slowly build out a plan for it. So if you don't like getting on the phone with people, maybe in the next month, you're like, okay, the first week of the month, I want to make one phone call. I want to make a connection with one person over the phone, and I can lead with an email to make sure their times are okay, and I don't have to cold call if that's not something I like to do. But then maybe by the end of the month, you want to have 3 phone calls in that week. So that way you can slowly progress up to it, and you'll get more comfortable with it, and you'll get more natural with it. But then one thing, I don't love talking over the phone, to be honest, unless I kind of know what we're getting into ahead of time. I feel like I don't like to be caught off guard too much over the phone, which sometimes you can. But I feel like when I know that I'm having a phone call or I'm going to call somebody, sometimes I'll type myself a light script or like little reminders of things that that person connects with, whether it's a sports team or their animal or things like that, just to have it in front of me in case I'm like, oh, what should I say next or things like that. Like it's easy for me to see the phone, my notes, and be like, oh yeah, is now a good time to chat? And if they're like, yeah, first I could say if it's a good time to chat, I could be like, well, first off, how is Roscoe doing? I remember last time we talked, you said you loved walking your dog. So I just wanted to check in, and hopefully that can lighten the mood a little bit. But then you can kind of move into your points or your what you were trying to ask that day. And if you have a couple little bullet points of where you're going, it helps keep you on track while also making you get all the information that you're hopefully looking for in that call.
Nice, nice. I love the little script, you know. I jot bullet points down,
Hmm.
and I think to have that script, it sort of takes away the little nervousness that
Hmm.
we all get in that. Well, this is awesome. And where do we find? I'm going to put in the show notes, but where do we find your podcast, and where do we find GL Berg? What's the best way for people that are listening to connect with you if they need a speaker or they want to talk sports?
Yeah, I mean, you can always shoot me an email, Kane, Kane, @glberg.com. Otherwise, connect with me on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. I'm trying to get more and more active over there. And I feel like I'm trying to post more about our speakers and the awesome events they're doing as well over there. So LinkedIn would be a great way to connect with me at Kane Harris. You can find the podcast that I do, Locked On Golden Gophers. You can find it on YouTube, or you can find it wherever you get your podcasts. So again, that's Locked On Golden Gophers. But yeah, otherwise, feel free to shoot me an email, connect on LinkedIn, or listen to the podcast. But I really appreciate your time too, and allowing me to hop onto your podcast and talk with your listeners and you.
Yeah, awesome. Well, you've been great. Thank you so much. And like I said, you have the GL Berg has the best pens ever. So when you meet Kane, get one of those pens, because then you'll remember all your speaker stuff. So thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the All-Star Networking Show with Cathy Paper. If you're interested in being a guest, please contact Cathy at www.rockpaperstar.com.